cover some of the basics of APA style if your professor asks you to write a paper or give a presentation using APA style. So there's a couple of different aspects. The first we're going to start with is references. You may be asked to turn in a references list or an APA style reference for an article. So in general, in APA style, when we talk about a references list, that's a list of works that you have referred to in your paper. Now note that this is different than a works cited page, which is used in other types of citations, because in APA style, you don't list a source that you just looked at but didn't actually cite. So you only list sources that you actually included in your paper. As you are reading your articles, it's important to keep track of the source they came from, and citing the source in a proper format is a really good way to start. So start with the references page. So the references list provides all of the information that a reader would need to find the article. And in a full manuscript, which we'll cover in just a few slides, the references list starts on a brand new page. Now you may be asked to just separately submit a references list as well. Okay, so when we're making a references list, a couple of things to keep in mind. First, in general, depending on the assignment, of course, you want academic references. So these are references in peer-reviewed journals, published books, things like that. Wikipedia articles and personal web pages are generally not considered academic sources. The first step to making an accurate references list is identifying the type of source. So probably the majority of sources that you will come across are going to be scholarly journal articles, but you may also use books, or you may occasionally, depending on the assignment, use a web page. So in general, what you want to do is identify what type of source it is, and then find an example of that type of source. So I've got a link here to the APA style webpage. If you have the APA manual, you can find the link there. But what you want to do, the best strategy here is, once you know what type of source you have and you find an example, just mirror that example. You don't necessarily have to do it from memory. You just need to be able to kind of fill in the relevant information and format it in the same way your example does. So pay attention to things like where the author's name is placed, whether it includes a full name or just an initial, what's in quotes, what's italicized, where there's punctuation. And then once you have all of your references formatted, you want to order your references in alphabetical order by the author's last name. You never want to reorganize the order of authors listed on a paper. Okay, so the authors have gotten together and decided who gets first author, generally the person who did the most work, who gets second author, and so on. So the order that's printed on the paper is the order that it stays in. But if you have 5 papers or 5 sources that you used in your list, in your references list, then you're going to alphabetize them by the author's last names. Okay, so the references list should include every source that you referenced in your paper, and also every source that is listed in your references list should have been cited in your paper. So you want to make sure that every time you include a citation in the text of your paper, it's also in the references, and vice versa. In terms of what the references page should look like, you've got the title, which is references, at the top of the page. All entries should be double spaced. Notice the formatting here is a little bit different than any other part of the paper, where the first line of the entry or the first line of the source is flush left, and then you indent every subsequent line. And then when you have a new reference, it goes all the way to the left and next lines are indented. And then you alphabetize by the first author's last name. Okay, so these are examples of what sources from a journal should look like. And again, this is probably going to be the majority of your paper, but keep in mind that in your paper, they should be double spaced times New Roman 5 to 12. Okay, so if you have one author, you'll see you've got the author's last name and then first and middle initials with a period after them. The year goes in parentheses. What's next is the article title. Notice the capitalization of the article title, only the first letter of the title and the first letter after a colon is capitalized. Everything else is lowercase. The only other exception to this is proper nouns. Then we've got the journal title, which is Psychology and Aging for this first one. The journal title goes in what we call title case. So all the major words are capitalized and it should be italicized. Then a comma, volume number is also italicized. Issue number in parentheses right after the volume with no space in between is not italicized. Comma, page numbers. And notice that with the page numbers, we don't put a P or anything before it. You just list the page numbers. And then this last thing is a DOI. It's actually a hyperlink based on the DOI. DOI is the digital object identifier. And so this link can bring you directly to article information. If we have two authors, it's essentially the same thing. The only difference is we put an ampersand between the authors. And then if you have 3 or more authors, we do the same thing. We put a comma and then an ampersand before the last one. Okay, so you may also cite a whole book. So if it's the whole book, you cite the authors the same way you would format the authors for a journal article, the date, title of the book, and name of the publisher. If you're using a chapter from a book, so a lot of kind of academic books will have multiple chapters with just, and each chapter will be written by a different author. So if you're pulling a chapter from a book, you list the chapter author's name first, the year of publication, the title of the chapter, and then then here we list the book authors, and they're really the editors, the book editors, the title of the book, edition, page numbers formatted a little bit differently in the publisher. So again, you don't need to have this memorized. What you need to do is know what kind of source you have and look up an example so that you can mirror it. Okay, the next thing is the in-text citations. So in-text citations are the citations that you use in the body of your paper as you're in your sentences, or if you're doing a presentation in on your slides. If you list information from an article, you'd use in-text citations to reference that article. So you want to, and so the purpose of in-text citations is to help locate a cited source in the reference page. So the goal here is to give just enough information for the reader to say, hey, the article sounds really interesting, and then go to your references page and find the matching entry. So basically the two pieces of information we provide are authors' last names and the date of publication. So I've got an example down here. The general rule when you want to cite the source within the text is if you mention a specific study, if you cite any kind of statistics, you need to cite your source. If you paraphrase an author's idea, this is going to be probably the bulk of your citations. You're going to be taking other people's ideas, putting them in your own words, but you need to acknowledge where you got the ideas from, and you do that through in-text citations. Or if you do a direct quote. In APA style, it is extremely rare to have direct quotes. In some of my classes, I do not allow them at all, so please use direct quotes with caution, and I would very much recommend against them. Okay, so when you are summarizing or paraphrasing, okay, so when you're citing a source after paraphrasing ideas, there's two general ways that you might cite them. The first and most common is after the idea. So beginning writers tend to really want to put the author's name in the sentence, which is okay. But as you're reading empirical articles, you'll probably notice that it's actually quite rare for us to cite the author's name in the sentence, and instead we cite it in parentheses afterwards. Okay, so if we don't mention the author's name in the text, we cite the last name, comma, at the year in parentheses. So during the transition to middle school, students generally lose old friends from elementary school and establish new friendships with previously unfamiliar peers, leading to low levels of friendship stability. The authors didn't find that. They got that idea from this Hardy article. The other way, though, that we might do this is if we do include the author's name in the sentence, then what we need to cite in parentheses is just the year. So something like, in contrast, Parker and Seal, and then we put the year immediately after we list the authors. Another thing I see beginning APA users do is they put the year at the end of the sentence. If you've got the author's name in the sentence, you want to put the year immediately after those authors' names so that they are connected. And so we've got Parker and Seal, 1996, identified individuals who maintained stable friendships, blah, 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 blah. But we have the point here is that you've got that year right beside the author's name. If you are citing after the idea, everything goes at the end of the sentence, or if you have a really long sentence, you might do it at the end of a clause, like right before a comma. A couple of special cases. One is if you need to cite 2 or more works. So if you say several people have done research on friendship and the transition to middle school, and you want to, in parentheses, acknowledge 2 or 3 studies, then what you do is you do it all in the same parenthetical citation, and you organize them by the first author's last name. And then if there are multiple by the same author, then you organize it by year of publication. You separate it with a semicolon. Okay, so this person wanted to say Catrew 2005 and Smith 2008. We alphabetize Catrew and Smith and put a semicolon between them. Another special case is if you have a work with 2 authors. If you're using in text, you would say something like, according to the authors Rate and Tate, 1997. And the thing that I want you to note about this is if the authors' names are part of a sentence, you include the word and written out. Now, if you have 2 authors in parentheses, you do it a little bit differently. So some researchers question this idea, Rate and Tate 1997. If the authors' names are in parentheses, though, you use an ampersand in between them. And finally, a work with 3 or more authors. If it's in text citation, we use et al. And actually, we use et al. Either way. So 3 or more authors, et al. Means and others. So if you have 3 or more authors, you use et al. To represent everyone else. So you list the first author and then et al. Means everyone else. And so you can do that in the text of the sentence. Harklau and et al. Year immediately after the authors identified that, blah, 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 blah. Or in parentheses, you can say something like evidence shows that this is true. Parentheses, Harklau et al. 1999. That tells me that Harklau and at least 2 other people did this. This is new to APA 7. So if you used previous editions, there were different rules that you don't need to know. But now, anytime we have 3 or more authors, we do et al. Okay, so again, I already gave a caution, but I want you to know how to cite them appropriately if you're going to use them. For most of my assignments, I do not allow students to use direct quotes, so I would strongly discourage them. As you're reading psychology research, you'll see that it's very rare that we use direct quotes. The best thing to do is paraphrase, put it in your own words, and cite it. But if you're going to use a direct quote, the other thing that you need to include, in addition to quotation marks, is the page number. Okay, so if you're using the author's name, you cite the author and the year in the sentence. We've got the quote, and then we put the page number at the end. If you are if you don't have the author's name in the sentence, then you include the author, page, year, and page number all in parentheses. But again, you really should not be using direct quotes. Okay, so a couple of things to make sure that you do not list. One is do not list the author's full name. We only refer to authors by their last name. So even when you're listing them in the text of your sentence, you just refer to the author by their last name. You don't include the affiliation. It's very rarely relevant. And so you just include the author's last name. You don't need to put the university they're affiliated with, and do not list the full title of the article or the full title of the journal in your sentence. Refer to the article by the author's last names and year. Okay, so especially I often see beginning writers using the full title of the article. It's bulky and awkward to read. Just refer to it by the author's names. If people need to know the title, they can go to your references list and find it. The other kind of special case is if you have one paragraph that is all about the same citation, so it's all about one article. Generally, the strategy that I recommend for that is that you cite the authors and year the first time you mention the reference. So one study by Smith and colleagues, 1999, provides a good example of this. And then you go on and describe the study. And you can kind of consistently, or you should consistently throughout the paper, refer to the authors and make it clear that you're talking about the same article and you don't need to cite it every single sentence. Smith and colleagues found an example of this. For example, their first finding demonstrated that blah, blah, blah. The second finding of this study demonstrated that blah, blah, blah. So you make it clear, you keep linking it back, and so it's clear that it's referring to the same article and you don't need to cite them every single sentence. Okay, this next section is about if you're putting a full paper into APA format. Okay, so not all of the assignments will require this. But this is general manuscript structure if you're asked to write an APA style paper. Now, I do want to note that APA 7 now separates out requirements for a student paper versus a professional paper. I think the biggest difference is that student papers do not require a running head and don't require an abstract. I generally assign my students to do kind of professional style papers. Which is what it would look like if you were submitting a manuscript for publication. So I do ask you to include a running head and abstract, but you should always check with the assignment details for what you need. Either way, most APA papers should have a title page. They may or may not have an abstract, but generally empirical articles do. We're going to talk about the main body formatting in the next slide, but it should include, your main body should definitely include in-text citations. If it's an empirical paper, it should have an introduction, method, results, and discussion. If it's not an empirical paper, you may have different headings, but it should definitely include those in-text citations, and you should have a references section. So generally, manuscript formatting, Times New Roman, size 10 to 12. Everything should be double spaced. Anytime you start a new paragraph, each paragraph should be indented a ½ inch. The text should be left aligned as opposed to centered or right aligned. And you should generally use formal writing. So no contractions, can't, won't, don't, get rid of those and write it out. You should avoid using questions in the text. So instead of saying, why would this happen to individuals with borderline personality disorder? You might say, there are several reasons why this might happen to individuals with borderline personality disorder. Rephrase it as a statement. And you also should be taking the third person point of view. This may vary by assignment, but in general, you do not want to use the words I, me, we, no first person in formal writing. Okay, so for the title page, a couple of things to be looking for. And again, the student version of APA 7 does not require running ahead, but the professional version does. So you may want to double check on the assignment what is expected. The page header, the running head, has changed slightly with the newer APA if you've used previous versions. It doesn't have the word running head, but it does have a running head. And that running head is basically keywords from the title. So it's a shortened version of the title, but what that should be is pulling keywords as opposed to just abbreviating words. Okay, so if your paper is the effect of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder on memory, your running head might be something like ADHD and memory. You're pulling out those kind of keywords. Should include the title, the author's name, and the affiliation. The abstract, again, requirements of whether or not you need an abstract vary for student versus professional paper, so make sure to check with the specific assignment. But if you do need an abstract is basically a paragraph summary of your paper, and it should include the important information from each section of your paper. So your abstract should be one of the last things that you write so that you make sure you know what you're saying in each section. Should be about 150 to 250 words. And you're going to center the title, which is abstract, at the top of the page. It's still left aligned, but the abstract is, I think, the only place in APA format where you don't indent the first line of the first paragraph. Okay, then you start the main body of your paper. In APA, even though you have an introduction, we never have a heading for introduction. Instead, the heading for your introduction is the title of the paper. So you're going to put the title of the paper just as you listed it on the title page at the beginning of your paper. The main body of your paper should be double spaced. All sections should follow each other without a page break, so you don't put any extra spaces or anything between sections. And you need to make sure to identify sources using in-text citations. And again, never refer to an article by the full title in the text of your paper, only by the author's last name and year. If you have a longer paper, you may need to use different sections and different levels of heading. So if you have multiple sections, you may end up using subsections. So levels of headings help your reader know what fits into what section. So you start from the top and work your way down. So the broadest sections are going to be level 1 headings, and the headings should be centered, bold, and title case. But if you have a subsection underneath that, you would use a level 2 heading. And so this would be flush left, bold, title case heading. So what this like is something like this. So a classic example of this is the method section, where the method section is one of the broadest levels. It's one of the primary sections of your paper, so it's a level 1 heading. But within the method, you talk about the sample or participants. Within the method, you also talk about instruments or measures, and you also talk about procedure. So you have these sections that fit within the method section. So method is a level 1 heading. Sample and instruments are level 2 headings because they fit within the method section. Okay, so that's the basics of APA format, but I also wanted to walk you through a few ways to get your information from the article search on EBSCO into an appropriate references page. If you haven't already watched my video about how to find articles on EBSCO, you may want to pause this and do that. But I'm going to just show you, I'm going to use this example. We're going to go on to EBSCO host. And do a quick search. Just going to search everything. And we're going to use this article as an example. And it's Castell, Lee, and Humphreys, 2011. So I'm going to see if I can find this. Really quick. Let's see. We're going to refine. Get there. Okay. Memory capacity. Here we go. Okay, so a couple of things to note. So here's the pull-up of the article. EBSCO does have a cite function. Okay, so if you click down here on the right, there is the cite option, and it will give you citations in a series of different format. And again, we want APA 7. Okay, so we can copy and paste this into a new Word document. Okay, actually, I'm gonna just get rid of the formatting. And so this actually doesn't look that bad, but I will caution you that it is not at all uncommon that there are mistakes. Things get put in all caps. capitalization is wrong. And so you really want to check this really carefully if this is what you're going to use to get your citations in there. And so I can tell, so we've got the authors, Castile, AD, Lee, SS. These are looking good. We got an ampersand before our last author, the year. This right here is the title of the article, which looks good. It's in sentence case. Now, the title of the journal is Neuropsychology and the volume is 25. This needs to be italicized. So we're going to italicize that. Issue doesn't need to be italicized, page numbers, and then we've got our DOI. So that's looking good. I'm going to make sure to put it in Times New Roman, size 12. The other thing that we need to do is it needs to be double spaced. So I'm just going to do Control to get it double spaced. The other thing that we need though is we need the indentation to be fixed, right? And so the best way to do this, I find there's several ways you can do this, but if you make sure you go to View in Word and have the ruler checked, you'll see this ruler up at the top. And this hourglass right here, if you select the bottom triangle, and sometimes it takes a few tries because you just want the bottom triangle, you drag that over a ½ inch. What that does is it leaves the first line to the left and every other line over. So this is how we want our citation to look. This is great. This doesn't always happen. Again, with those citations, sometimes there are issues. So you need to make sure you check it very carefully. The other way we might do this is directly from the article. And so I wanted to kind of show you how to find that information on the article as well. So of course, we've got all the authors here. So let's just go ahead and type it up and pretend like it is a new article. So we've got Castile, AD, Lee, SS, Breeze, KL, and more. And so authors are right at the top. That's easy peasy. Often the information you need is at the top of an article. It's often at the top of the first page, or it may be towards the bottom of the first page. So that information you can generally find on the PDF. If you can't find it on the PDF, go back to EBSCO, because even if you're not using the citation function, it has all of the information: source, publication type, authors, well, the title is up here, the DOI is down here, so all the information you need is right there. So this is from 2011. Okay, we got a period after the title. We need to type up the title of the article, which is very obvious right here. Memory capacity. And I'm just going to copy and paste so you don't have to watch me type. Okay, so we've got our article title right here. And then we need the journal title, and you need to be a little careful with this because on our article, we can see that it's got the American Psychological Association listed as the copyright, but the actual journal is Neuropsychology. Okay, so we want to list the journal and not the publisher. So again, if you're not sure, you can always go to this to EBSCO and find the article again and look at the source, Neuropsychology. Okay, so our source should be title case. And it's also going to be italicized, but let's get the volume in here as well. So the volume is 25, issue 1. And I'm getting this all from this top section of the article, of the PDF. So all that information is there. We're going to italicize, Control-I, title of the journal and the volume of the journal. For page number, this PDF very conveniently listed at the top. Again, sometimes you can look at the bottom of the page numbers or the top of the page if you're not sure if it doesn't list it there. If you can't find it, check on EBSCO, check the listing on EBSCO. And then we need the DOI. And again, I'm just going to take it from here. If you can find the hyperlink, that's the best. But you can also just list the DOI. Okay, and because I did, I fixed the formatting on using the little ruler thing, it automatically formatted the lines for this. The only other thing that I wanted to point out while I'm in Word is how to do a running head. So generally, if you double click on the top part, it will get you up to this header section. you will have the option to, I would start with the page number. So we're going to insert a page number on the top of the page. We want it on the right. So the best thing to do is insert that page number first, but you know you want your running head here. So get your page number in there so that doesn't mess anything else up, and then type your running head, ADHD and memory, I think was what we decided. And then if you just hit tab, normally 2 or 3 times, 2 times is all it took, it takes the running head to the left and the page number to the right. I want to make sure that this is in Times New Roman so it's consistent with the rest of my paper, but now I have the running head. If my paper runs on to other pages, that will be on every single page and the page number will change as necessary. Okay, and of course, if this were actually my references list, I would want to have the word references bolded. Okay, so that is a very quick primer on APA style. And if you have any questions, double check your assignment or let me know.